So in our tutorial today, we are going to make one of these fab little gift bags. I call them the flower gift bags because the top of it just looks like a little flower. They're super simple, you don't need much, and they are a great way of wrapping up something that's quite an awkward shape, or filling it with a bag full of chocolates or something like that. So let's get started. So in this tutorial for the flower gift bag, we're going to need 2 squares of fabric. They're about 12 inches or 30 centimetres square. It can be a bit bigger, it can be a bit smaller, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be precise. So about that sort of size, 12 inches or 30 centimetres. And then we're going to need some ribbon, and you're going to need 2 lengths of ribbon. And ideally that should be about 1 metre long or maybe 39 inches. So we don't need a lot to make this really cute little gift bag. The very first thing that we're going to do is take our 2 pieces of fabric and we're going to put them right sides together, and we're going to stitch all the way around our fabric, leaving an opening for turning through. So I'm just going to go away and do that on the sewing machine, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam just all the way around. It can be pivoted in the corners or you can do crossing corner seams, that's entirely up to you. So I've sewn a seam all the way around all 4 sides, and I've got an opening left in this one side here. So before I turn it through, I'm just going to do my little cheeky trick, which is I like to press back the seam allowance for the opening. So I'm just going to press that back. I'm going to finger press it with this fabric, but you might want to get the iron onto your fabric. And what that does is it means that when you actually do turn it through, what you're going to find is that you've got a nice crisp edge where you've got to sew your opening shut. So that's all pressed back, so that's going to be nice and neat and tidy. So I'm just going to pop my hand inside and just pull that through, and then I'm just going to take care with my corners. So I'm just going to fold along the seam lines and push those through, and then hopefully they should come through nice and square. So if I just show you that again, find another corner, I'm just folding the fabric along the edge of the seam line. So where the seam is, I'm just using that as a fold guide, and then I'm just pushing through. And just do that on the last 2 down the bottom as well. Folding along the seam line, and then just pushing through, and you end up with quite a nice square corner. So having done that, you can see now what I mean about my folded edge up here. That's nice and crisp and just waiting to be stitched into place basically. So with this all turned through, I'm going to give it a little press, and then I'm going to whiz a top stitch around this. So a top stitch is going to be stitched from the right side. Ideally, it won't matter so much on this because both sides are going to be seen. And it's going to be about 2 millimeters in from the edge of my fabric. So I'll make sure that my seams are all brought out right to the edge, so I pinch them right out so it's nice and crisp when I press it. And then I'm going to stitch that top stitch just 2 millimeters in from the edge so it's nice and close. I always say with top stitch, just go steady, don't rush it, because it does matter, it does show. If you choose a neutral thread, then obviously it won't show as much, or a colour coordinating thread. And sometimes it can look nicer with a slightly longer stitch length. So I might put the stitch on my machine up to maybe a 3.5 or a 4. And I'm just going to pivot in the corners as I go round. So when I'm lining up for my top stitching, what I like to do is have this edge here of my fabric just visible inside the centre window of my presser foot. So it's just coming down the side. And then I have my needle positioned centrally so that I'm just, as you can see, if you see the centre mark on my presser foot versus the edge of the fabric, I'm just a couple of millimetres in from the edge. So that's how I would line it up on my machine. Another option, depending on the size of your presser foot, might be to take the fabric all the way to the edge of your presser foot and then move your needle across to the right hand side. But I think for me, I prefer to do it the other way and just be that little bit closer to the edge. But either of those ways would work absolutely fine. Okay, so everything is now top stitched and that opening has been sewn shut in the process. So now we've got our square. We're now going to measure 8 centimetres in from each corner and put a mark. So just going to measure 8 centimetres in from this corner. So if you're metric, if you're imperial, that's going to be just over 3 inches. 3 inches would be fine. So put a mark there, and then I'm just going to twist it round. So I'm just going to do this on each corner, marking 8 centimetres in from the edge. You could use a fabric marker pen, whatever your chosen marking tool is or whatever you've got to hand. And these bits we're going to fold back the corners. So I'm working on the outside fabric at the moment because I'm going to fold back the inside fabric to make the flower petal. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is folding back my corners so that they look like this. So having marked my 8 centimetres, I'm going to fold back my corner and I'm just going to pin that down, and I can take those 2 pins out. Same on this corner here. I'm just going to fold back the corner where the pins are, pop a pin in there and take the marking pins out, and repeat that process on all 4 corners. Okay, so I've now turned back the corners of my square. I'm now going to run a seam line across this corner to create a channel that my ribbon is going to go through. So the size of the channel might vary a little bit depending on what sort of ribbon you're using. I'm going to use some fairly thin grosgrain ribbon, so I'm just going to make sure that I use a centimetre seam allowance, and I can take that readily and easily off of my machine. If you're going to use something chunky, just think about the fact that you're going to have 2 sets of whatever you're using going through there. So you effectively need enough space for 2 layers of your ribbon to go through. So I'm just going to go over to the machine and sew across the diagonal, just sticking on the actual fabric that's turned back, not going onto this fabric here. And I'm going to sew a centimetre in from the edge. And I'm going to do that on all 4 corners. Brilliant, so our corners are now turned back. I'm just going to catch that last thread over there. I've just used a neutral grey thread on this, but you could obviously use a colour coordinating thread and your stitches would disappear a little bit more. So I'm going to take my pins out, and then our next job is to thread our ribbon. So we've got 2 pieces of ribbon, each about 1 metre long, 39 inches about there, and I'm going to thread it all the way around. So I've got some plastic needles that I've kept from other craft projects or free gifts or magazines, and I'm just going to start on this side here, and I'm just going to thread that through there and then through the next side. I'm going to go all the way back round to the start. I love these plastic needles. I use them so much in different jobs. It's almost worth sometimes buying a children's sewing kit if you lose one, just to get the plastic needle. Okay, so that's gone through that side, and I'm just going to tie those two ends together in a knot. You might want to check whether you've got any twists in your ribbon at this stage. Just make it lie nice and flat and make sure it's not twisted. But this is quite a thin ribbon, so I'm not too worried. And if you've got enough ribbon, your square should hopefully sit relatively flat. So having started that one from that side, because I've twisted it round, I'm now going to start this ribbon from this side, so that the knots will be on opposite sides of the bag. And you'll notice that I'm using a red ribbon, and I'm working with sort of pinks and reds. And I've always been a fan of red and pink together. I know a lot of people don't like that, but I really do like it. And bright pink and apple green, that's kind of one of my favourite colour combos as well. Although in lots of other areas of life, I don't actually like the colour pink. But it's okay on the fabric if I'm not wearing it. Okay, so threaded that one through, and I'm just going to knot this side off. Like so. And then you should see that your square can still lay relatively flat with your two pieces of ribbon pulled through. Just make those knots a little bit smaller. And our bag is finished. So just to show you exactly how it works, I'm going to flip it over. So this is the inside, and I'm going to put my apple in it today. And I'm just going to pull my sides really carefully. Just push that in. So we want that to gather to the inside. And there we have your really cute little flower gift bag. So you can just pop all your treats inside and then tie the handles together, or create a handle just by tying your ribbons together. And then you can go and pop that on somebody's door and leave them a lovely little treat. And given that I'm filming this in the end of January 2021 and there's a bit of a pandemic going on, it'd be quite nice just to leave a little something on somebody's doorstep and give them a nice surprise. So a really simple little gift bag, perhaps for some of those hard to wrap gifts that are round as well. And there you go, fab tutorial. So if you make one, I do love to see it. So tag us on social media at Made and Making, or leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that tutorial.